This is the DarshanTalks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of DarshanTalks. My name is, as always, it hasn't changed yet. It's still Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help patients trust the products they depend on. I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, I'm a regulatory guy, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you have an interest in FDA-regulated companies or their products,
I'm a pharmacist, I'm a regulatory guy, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products.
Are you hearing
an FDA-regulated company?
For some reason, I heard my own voice again. So today's podcast is a frequent guest of ours. We have the person who will talk to you about promotional compliance. We've had many discussions on this already, and we're likely to have many more. So if you are in promotional compliance, if you are an advertiser, you can care about today's talk, because what you may not know could come back to haunt you. Today's guest is the president of Cooke Consulting, and it helps companies communicate about FDA-regulated products using 21st century tools while remaining compliant with the regulations written in the 1960s. To reiterate, it is the reason he uses 20th century tools to look at how rocket ships should really be operating. And those rules are woefully out of date, and yet here he is trying to make do. He's sort of like what our judges have to do with the Constitution from 200, 300 years ago. So welcome, Dale Cooke, our guest for today. How are you doing, Dale?
Thank you, Darshan. Great to be back.
So Dale, we've had several conversations already on this podcast, on this live stream, and one of the areas we discussed a few days ago, or at least actually just right before this, is this idea of a new world around the types of ads that people are talking about and the type of promotional pieces people are talking about. The one that really came to mind, and I haven't seen that before, to be honest, you said you have, the pre-qualification of people who use the ads. So first, explain a little bit more about what that means, and we'll kind of go over and sort of parse it out a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I marketers are always coming up with new innovative technologies, which is great for me because, it keeps me employed. And the complexity of this stuff, its sophistication is really growing significantly. One of the things that I just recently have been asked about is the so-called, pre-qualification. So the ad unit that you experience on a website, wherever you are on the internet, NewYorkTimes.com or CNN.com. I obviously read a lot of news, but it could be ESPN.com, or it could even be something entertaining. That the ad will only appear if you have interacted with it, and interacted with it to identify yourself as the type of prospect that the advertiser wants to target. So there's some sort of engagement, a simple question that pops up. Would you like to learn about cooking this breakfast sausage in new ways, right?
Yeah.
Are you interested in new recipes for breakfast, right?
Right.
So there's something there that sort of prompts you to identify yourself as, I'm looking for a new breakfast, menu item, right? And thus then the advertiser, who in that hypothetical model would presumably be a breakfast sausage manufacturer, would then serve up the ad. Well, here are, 14 different recipes for using, breakfast sausage A in new and innovative ways, right? So that's the basic concept behind these types of ad presentations. And in the pharmaceutical realm, they raise interesting questions, because what are those, well, yeah, where are your responsibilities, and what do you control, and what is the user experience, and are you engaged in promotional communications right from the start, even before you've qualified the people? How are you qualifying the people? Are there sensitivity issues? I know you, Darshan, do a lot of work on transparency and privacy concerns. You know, you can, I don't think it takes very long thinking about this type of a thing before you start to say, well, no, wait a second, what questions am I asking people? How is that data being handled? If I click on an ad while I'm visiting some website, did you somehow or other track what I did? So now who's tracking that? Is it the website I'm visiting? Is it this third-party ad server who's doing it? Is it the advertiser? Is that information fully de-identified? Is it, HIPAA compliant? Do I need to worry about whether it's HIPAA compliant? So the questions that this raises, there are lots of issues that come up.
It sounds like it's very clean, very straightforward question. No one should have any problems with this.
We're just talking about breakfast sausage, for God's sake. Like, how can breakfast sausage be all that complicated, right?
But let's pick away at it like a scab wound that probably you shouldn't be picking at it, but here we are, because that's what we do for a living. We pick away at scab wounds. Let's start with the basic, which is cookies. And cookies have been in the news recently because Facebook has come out and said that we'd like cookies, please. And Apple's going, yeah, not so much. And now when you're starting to do pre-qualification.
Well, and now also Google has said they're going to do away with them, right? So
that's my question. Is this pre-qualification process a temporary step until we get to a no cookie world, first of all? So should the FDA even try to put some rules around this, or is it going to be out of date in no time?
Well, I don't know. So I don't actually know that this will require cookies or not. Okay. I'm not sure on the back end from a pure technology standpoint. And I think actually partly this might be a response to the moving away from cookies, because if we're not going to try to identify you, right? The idea behind cookies were developed originally basically so that we could tell when what was in your shopping cart, right? Yeah. I'm not trying to be, overly simplistic, but basically that's the idea. Like, we need to know that you are you, so that if you do something on my website, like put an item in my shopping cart, when you click on a link, I know that you're the person whose shopping cart it is, right? And so I don't have to every time sort of start all over again, and you could never have those types of engagements, right? That you've seen the site. But then cookies started being used to track people way beyond, my engagements with you putting items in my shopping cart. And they started to be used for things like, determining what item you looked at but didn't put in your shopping cart. And now I'm going to serve you up an ad when you go to this other independent website. And so and I'm sure every user and you have had the experience of, considering a shoe and not buying it, and then for the next 3 months you see tons of ads for that shoe over and over and over again on every website you visit, and so that's the concern that some companies like Apple and Google have raised about cookies, is that that's not sort of what they were intended to be used for, and there are privacy issues there, that maybe it feels a little creepy for the users to think that everybody is watching their shopping habits. And so people are moving away from cookies. The pre-qualification notion is, I think, in part a response to that, because we won't know that you were looking at those shoes. So now we got to ask you, hey, you interested in looking at some new shoes? And if you say yes.
So
and get the
I
ad.
find it fascinating, first of all, that you get, like, I know we both work with promotional agencies all the time, and you gave them such a benefit of the doubt in that you went, you know what? It's important to recognize that they had these goals, and now people are saying, people feel icky. It had nothing to do with the fact that GDPR is coming in and it's basically preventing that. It has nothing to do with the state laws coming in. It's that people are finally waking up to their responsibilities as good citizens. And I'm not sure I'm not sure I necessarily agree with the good citizen argument, but I think the rest of your point still stands. But let's sort of delve into that a little bit more. So we're saying,
regardless of what prompted them to generate the concerns, they now have seen the light.
Correct. They've now seen the light. So now we're in a situation where we're saying, do you have Crohn's disease? Now here's my question: why is that not necessarily just a disease awareness ad?
Well,
I'm not saying more.
Yeah. So this is we're instantly into it, right? So first off, should that be your question, right? If you're asking that question, are you starting to, head down a certain path? Like, for example, are you suggesting that the ad that follows would be appropriate for every patient who has Crohn's disease? So are you already starting to, identify a certain set of a patient population, not all of whom might be on label for your specific product, right? Sure. Second, yes, as you're saying, isn't that just a disease awareness communication? So this is partly what's the user experience, right? If the user says yes, and then they see an ad for a product that treats probably not all, but some patients with Crohn's disease, is that question part of your promotional communication, or is it a separate communication, right? The separation issue is a big one when it comes to disease awareness campaigns, right? One of the factors that the FDA identified in its since withdrawn guidance on disease awareness communications was temporal and spatial proximity of disease awareness communications with promotional messaging. Yep. There ain't no space difference, and the time difference is a split second, right? So,
well, I would argue, I'm going to disagree with you, because there is space difference. I mean, the FDA has come out and said that, you know what? We consider one click to be one click too far in the context of risk communications. So if you're going to count that in the context of risk communications, it's a little unfair to say we won't count that in the context of disease awareness.
Well, what I meant when I said for space considerations is that it's literally the same pixels on the screen in front of you that change from being the disease awareness ad into being the product promotional communication. So it's the identical space that is being occupied, right? As opposed to even in a magazine where you could have, facing pages, or, the middle of the magazine and the back of the magazine, or whatever kind of stuff.
But let's explore that. So what if it's not the same pixels? What if it actually directs you to a page? And the question that I already have a question to be planned, but question 2A for right now is, let's say it takes you to a website that has mesalamine. I think that's what Crohn's. I should know this as a pharmacist, but I don't remember.
Yes.
Let's assume mesalamine, or whatever drug it is for Crohn's. I apologize to clients. But it takes you to the page. It says, this product is approved for XYZ disease state, mild to moderate. Here are the risks. Here are the benefits. And it's all in the same place. But the initial ad that drew them away, the banner ad, if you will, was just a disease awareness communication.
Well, so I refer to these types of communications importantly distinct, and I refer to them as redirecting ads, not disease awareness communications, because the whole idea behind these is that a disease awareness communication, per FDA's guidance, is not intended to drive product messaging, right? It's to raise awareness about the condition, encourage people to discuss it with their doctor, get tested, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, these communications, I think, are importantly different, because the whole idea is to get somebody into a product messaging context, right? A disease awareness ad that's a banner ad shouldn't take me to a product website. I think that's wrong. I think a disease awareness ad should take you to a disease awareness website.
So, hold on. I want to draw that qualification. Is that, and again, just to be clear, and I want to put this up for all of us to, this is not legal advice. So are you saying that is Dale's personal opinion from an ethics standpoint, that this is not right? Or have you seen some kind of feedback from the FDA or FTC saying that's how we've interpreted this language?
Well, I think conceptually these are different things, and when people talk about them as if they're the same thing, they get confused very quickly, right?
Okay.
And so the disease awareness communications, because they are not product promotions, are not, for example, bound by the limitations of a product label, right? So I can do a disease awareness website that talks about every different version of Crohn's disease and tons of different populations who suffer from Crohn's disease, and all sorts of different treatment modalities for Crohn's disease. My specific product, my specific version of mesalamine or whatever, right, would probably not be appropriate for every single one of these different types of conditions, for every conceivable, you know, patient population, right? I'm just highly, highly unlikely to have that be true about my product. So have I done anything wrong if I'm the disease awareness communication generator, the person who put out that message, in including all of this stuff that goes way beyond my product's label? And my answer is absolutely not, because you're engaged in a disease awareness communication. By definition, you're not promoting product. So yeah, it might actually be irresponsible not to talk about all of this stuff that your product has nothing to do with. By contrast, in a redirecting communication, where I'm intending to take somebody down to my product, now I think all of those types of considerations become highly relevant, right? That I do want to make sure that I'm not suggesting, you know, that in my redirecting ads that, oh, this is going to cure everybody who has Crohn's disease, right? Click here to learn about the cure for Crohn's disease. I never mentioned my product, so look, it's just a disease awareness ad. Now all of a sudden I'm at, you know, brand A of mesalamine. Oh, look, you know, it must be a cure for Crohn's disease, because the ad that brought me over here told me that I was going to get a cure, right? Yeah. Even though I don't use the word cure on the website. So that's the kind of thing that I think is why it's important conceptually to keep the two categories separate, even though they share a lot of characteristics the same.
So let's continue down that path. What if instead of taking you to the brand website, it takes you to a qualification form where you have to choose which criteria you meet? And if you meet all the appropriate criteria, it directs you to the page.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it directs you to a disease awareness page.
Sure. Yeah, and let's do what the marketers and the commercial teams do, which is let's complicate it just one level further, and let's include a, you know, telehealth option. That is where you actually go on the back end. So now all of a sudden you're pre-qualifying people to learn more, and we're hooking them up to a healthcare provider who can immediately write the script, and we're going to drop ship. Yes, this is why this gets complicated very, very quickly. And I think you need to draw these distinctions very crisply and cleanly in your individual communications, so that you do have, you know, whatever that pre-qualification is, that you treat that as a distinct message and understand it as such.
Yeah.
Understand what the user experience is going to be. If they don't meet whatever the qualification is that you've set out, what are they going to see? Are they going to say, thank you for letting us know that you don't have Crohn's disease? Or are they going to see, you know, an ad for breakfast sausage, right? Or, you know, whatever.
Let's say they click on it, they say that it, and you don't meet the criteria, it takes you to a page about Crohn's disease awareness, or takes you to a patient, to a patient advocacy group.
Absolutely.
And I think it gets really interesting really quickly. I want to get a little bit into what you said, which is an area I've seen popping up a little bit more around the telemedicine, because I'm seeing clients push that option more and more. I've seen it often happen where you're seeing physicians and pharmacists work together with a telemedicine option to make sure that refills are happening. But what happens if you are, say, a venture-backed pharmacy? And I'm curious if the company needs to start worrying about it. But let's say you're a venture-backed pharmacy, we'll not name which one, and you only specialize in Crohn's medications. And you now promote this and you say that if you have this, come onto my website, I only sell you 2 or 3 Crohn's type products. And if you don't have a prescription for it, don't worry about it. We have a telemedicine option that'll make sure you can get it. Does that start worrying you as a marketing compliance leader?
Yeah, I mean, this space, and I saw, I've seen a few articles about it, and I've been interviewed for stories about this topic. And so far as I can tell, they're playing in a space where it really depends on what the contractual business relationships are. Because at the end of the day, the scope of their authority only reaches as far as the NDA. And, you know, what I mean by that is, you know, if you're the manufacturer, the sponsor, the distributor, et cetera, of the product. And if you don't fall within that ambit, then you're outside the jurisdiction. And this is where we're going with all of these things. You know, I'm of a certain age. I still refer to myself as the middle, but, you know, it's very late in the middle portion. And so I see all of these ads targeting me for certain product categories that, you know, not going to surprise, you know, for somebody my age and demographics, and their testosterone replacement therapies, they're, you know, for balding, erectile dysfunction, right? All of these promotions coming at me, obviously for obvious reasons. I'm in their core demographics. And they are, as far as I can tell, they're promoting the product. They're not just raising awareness about it. They want to get me on therapy, right? And, you know, boy, that seems like the kind of thing FDA regulation was intended to apply to, doesn't it? I mean,
it really does. And what makes it even more interesting is, I'm sure you remember from a few years ago, the FDA sent out a letter to a doctor's office for claims they were making about, I think it was a medical device. And I remember being in the room when the FDA announced it, and most of the lawyers went, wait a second, do you actually have authority here? And FDA took the position that you're promoting the product at this point.
Yeah.
And we therefore have concerns. So the question is, why wouldn't that same logic start applying to pharmacies? So is the next version of promotional compliance going to these venture-backed pharmacies and going, calm down, you may not be able to say the things you want to say because you're exposing or risking yourself. On the other hand, we've sort of worked with a lot of promotional companies take the position that a warning letter from the FDA is a badge of honor. We're supposed to push this to the limit. And if we don't get the warning letter, it means that you haven't pushed enough to the limit. And is a venture-backed pharmacy in the same genre, if you will. Where they
So
want-
none of my clients are pushing the walls to the limit and
Ever.
out there. I don't want any of my clients to, think that they have been, characterized appropriately by Darshan. So if you're viewing this right now, he's not talking about you.
I'm not talking about any of the clients we have right now or have ever had, I guess, apparently.
There are these hypothetical, mythical companies out there that we have heard of. Until FDA actually does something, would you suggest that somebody put themselves under the constraints of being, acting as if? I don't think you would. I don't know why you would. I mean,
well, I guess the question is, hasn't the FDA already done it with that doctor's warning letter?
I mean, I'm not sure which specific case you're talking about. The one that I'm thinking of is the lap band.
I think that's what it was. I think it was a lap band one.
Yeah.
Where
it was all of these, when lap band came out, people forget how revolutionary that was, and all of these bariatric surgery centers started putting up, billboards all over the country and running ads promoting it. And you have this all the time with hospitals doing it, right? In some cases, explicitly by, we're both in the Philadelphia marketplace, and, some amazing therapies have been developed in local regional hospitals, which then very actively promote, come to our hospital because we're the hospital where X, Y, and Z therapy was. So, again, if you're the manufacturer of the product, boy, that looks like why can't we do that, Dale? And the answer is, well, you can't do that because you hold the NDA and they don't. So, there are certain privileges and responsibilities that come, with these roles. I don't know that the FDA would do that, take that same action today. I just don't know.
What is the argument that they wouldn't? Just the fact that they haven't, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, that they haven't, but the landscape, the legal landscape has changed since then. That's going back about 10 years ago or so. I think that predates the Sorrell case, IMS Sorrell, which was the most recent time that we've had this SCOTUS opine on this particular question about the appropriate limits of regulation in these commercial speech contexts, specifically for pharmaceutical companies. And so I don't know what they would do. They haven't, right? And some of these products that are targeting me, I look at their promotional communications, and because I do this for a living, it's like, oh boy. It's not just like my clients would say, why can't I do that? It's like, I'd be like, are you insane? No. I mean, that's just irresponsible. You should not be doing that. And I'm not gonna, suggest any specific, companies that I think are engaging in irresponsible promotion, but you need to, you've got a responsibility if you do this stuff for a living, and you need to take it seriously.
So if you have that responsibility from a trust perspective, why shouldn't pharmacists have that same responsibility as a drug company and I say this as a pharmacist, pharmacists are more well-liked than drug companies. And yet we're saying that they aren't holding themselves to the same standard.
Well, yeah, always remember that it was Virginia Board of Pharmacy that was the case that opened up this can of worms, right? And the Virginia Board of Pharmacy case, what was it, 73, something like that? The pharmacies wanted to advertise the prices of their drugs. And the dissent by Rehnquist says, oh my God, don't you realize what's going to happen here? People are going to start advertising cigarettes and liquor and prescription drugs. You're going to see ads on TV for prescription drugs. The horror. Can you imagine? Right? And the majority's like, no. Rehnquist doesn't know what he's talking about. He's insane. You know, we're not doing that at all. And of course, now we live in Rehnquist's world. He was incredibly prescient about exactly what was being done. Should pharmacists hold themselves to that standard? That, I think, is an interesting ethical question for you as a pharmacist. And since I am not a pharmacist, I am going to defer to the pharmacist about what the ethical obligations of your profession are.
I'll answer it.
Okay.
I think the answer is that you should hold yourself to the highest standard there is as a professional. However, as a business, I think that there is a distinction. And the question is, which one are you operating as? Are you operating as a business or as a professional?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this specific instance, like you said, if there are no rules that limit it, then from an ethical standpoint, the question is, have you really, are you going farther than is expected? But I think that from a legal standpoint, I think you may be in clearer territory. From an ethical standpoint, I think it starts getting a little flimsier, because if you should know better, then maybe you should hold yourself to a better standard.
Yeah, and then of course, should there be a legislative fix, right? Should Congress expand FDA's authority and suggest that FDA does have the authority?
Which technically they do. I mean, because FDA does have jurisdiction over compounding pharmacies, 503B facilities.
Well, but not their advertising, right? So, so should they just expand the scope of FDA's authority and say any ads for prescription products need to fall under FDA's purview, not merely the promotional communications and advertising messages put out by the sponsors, manufacturers, yada, yada, yada. If Congress were to do so, would that be upheld by the current Supreme Court? Would they find that consistent with the post-Virginia Board of Pharmacy jurisprudence on commercial speech? Yeah, these are tough questions, Darshan. This must be why people don't want to come on your show, because you ask these hard questions. I mean, this is not easy. I don't know.
I think, anyways. So let's pivot a little bit. What's a question, Dale? Because we're out of time. What's a question you would want the audience to answer for us?
What would I want the audience to answer for us? On these pre-qualifications, what are your concerns about it? Are they primarily privacy concerns? Are they primarily FDA compliance concerns? Are they primarily concerns about, marketing ickiness, for lack of a better term, not, sheer creepiness of what's going on? Were you even aware of the whole Google, Apple, Facebook cookie issue that's going on right now? Are you seeing new technologies, emerging? Because we're all going to be living in a post-cookie world really, really soon. So what, if any, concerns do you have about that?
Yeah, that was Dale. You are the specialist in compound questions.
Yeah, you asked for one, didn't you? Sorry, I don't follow you.
We're good. Okay, so during this podcast, Dale, we landed up talking about pre-qualification ads, their distinction from redirects, and we talked a little bit about the use of cookies, as you mentioned, for pre-qualifications, and what are the ramifications of that. We did a little bit of a side visit, if you will, telemedicine land. We then landed up speaking about how all of this connects to pharmacy, for example, and the types of claims that you'll see. Did I miss anything?
And the whole connection to free speech, First Amendment jurisprudence, and where is the agency on this question? Where is, I believe it was Janet Woodcock, Dr. Woodcock, who is the current acting commissioner of FDA, who in October 2019, I think it was, said at an industry event, FDA has to take into consideration the current jurisprudence on these concerns. So,
very cool.
Very
Nothing in this podcast should be construed as legal or clinical advice of any kind. It is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. For those of you who missed it, Dale, where can they reach you?
PhillyCook.com. And follow me on Twitter at PhillyCook.
Perfect. And if you like this podcast, please leave a comment, please subscribe, please answer Dale's questions actually. And you can find me at DarshanTalks on Twitter, or go to our website at DarshanTalks.com. Dale, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
This is the DarshanTalks podcast, regulatory guy, irregular podcast with host Darshan Kulkarni. You can find the show on Twitter at DarshanTalks or the show's website at DarshanTalks.com.